Well, hello there. Who are you?
This is the Zodiac speaking.
Killing must feel good to God, too. He does it all the time. And are we not created in his image?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
After all, murder is, or should be, an art.
I could kill you now pretty easily. Do some interesting things before anyone showed up.
What are these films you can't wait to look at?
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast and the 13th episode of our series dedicated to on-screen serial killers of horror film history. I'm your podcast host, Anna Bukatskaya, and in this episode, we're going to Italy to sip martinis and commit some murders. I'm joined by fellow Ripley head actor and writer Isaura Barbé-Brown to talk about Anthony Minghella's 1999 film The Talented Mr. Ripley, starring several people at their absolute peak. Matt Damon, Jude Law, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Gwyneth Paltrow and Cate Blanchett make up the cast for this sun-soaked adaptation of Patricia Highsmith's most iconic serial grifter and murderer, Tom Ripley. We discuss how the film adapts her timeless crime novel and whether Tom Ripley even counts as a serial killer or not. His body count is high enough to include him in the season, so get off my back. I'm a huge Ripley fan, and if you're interested in my thoughts on the other film adaptations, and there have been several, I wrote a long essay about them in my newsletter at Mid1. And since we couldn't get enough, Isaura and I did a whole companion episode about the new Netflix series Ripley starring Andrew Scott, which you can find over on the Final Girls Patreon. All of these links will be in the show notes. As always, you can follow along to what I'm covering in this serial killer series over on the Final Girls Letterboxd. And since I also want to visit the Italian Riviera, although not to commit murders, for the record, you can leave this podcast a little review if you're enjoying these episodes, or support us over on Patreon if you just can't get enough of horror films, TV shows, and books. With all of that said, please enjoy our take on the talented Mr. Ripley.
It's like really triggered like a sickness in me, I fear. But I'm great. I'm here.
You rewatched it yesterday, and you were just rewatching it again today?
Yeah. I was like, well, I have some time before we start. I guess I'll just put it on again. Yeah. Like, I'm unwell levels involved in Ripley at the moment. It's like bad.
Listen, I think we're both down bad because I have transitioned from, I was writing this very long-winded, like very long piece for a website for the LARB, and I watched all the movies. I like every single Ripley movie.
Yeah.
I watched a TV show twice. I had read the books. And I was dipping in and out of Patricia Highsmith's diaries. And then because I had to do kind of a deep dive on the podcast into Hannibal Lecter and Silence of the Lambs and all this jazz, I substituted Ripley for Hannibal Lecter. So every couple of weeks I get this intense fixation on one killer and all of the media accoutrement of that killer. So this week it's Chucky. So I've gone from Tom Ripley to Hannibal Lecter to Chucky.
You're like, what's the show? Oh my god. About the serial killers. The FBI interviewing them. Oh my god.
Mindhunter?
You're Mindhunter. You're making a lot of profiles. You're like, you have to be them to catch them.
Oh my god. Girl hunter. That's what... That's my personality.
The only way to write about them is to be inside them. You have to understand.
That's this entire season, Isaura. That's literally it. This is the 13th episode, right? I'm gone. Like, I've completely been subsumed by the serial killers, the fictional movie killers that I've been kind of covering. It's my favorite season so far, I think. I'm enjoying it so much.
You could get a job with the FBI right after this. You could be like,
1000%.
I've done my research. Just how I felt after reading Moby Dick. I was like, I could move to New England and become a whaler if I wanted to. That's how thorough this book is. I feel fully prepared to not even do new whaling. I don't even know what new whaling looks like. Old-timey whaling I could do. I was very confident.
So I love this as a starter for the episode. I think this will lay out to the listeners just how far gone and how far deep into the lore, the world, the fashion of Tom Ripley we both are. So to kick off, can you tell me, Isaura, when did you first meet Tom Ripley? Was it the books? Was it the films? Was it this film in particular?
It was this film.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have no idea. You'd think this film would have left an indelible mark in my brain the first time I saw it, because everyone's so incredibly hot that I'd remember the exact day and time I saw it the first time, but I actually don't. I think probably I was just kind of stunned into like a kind of realm of, I don't know, like gorgeous Italian disbelief. So I don't know when I saw it. I know I was probably a teenager, but I have no idea where in my teenage years. And I loved it instantly, mostly because I don't think I even really, I'm not sure that I fully even grasped what was happening in the story, because I think I was just like, everyone looks so good. Like, this was my Jude Law awakening. I do know that.
Yes.
And so I think that was mainly what I was thinking about. I don't think I really even knew what the story was. I don't think I could have told anyone, like, this is what happens in this film after the first time I saw it. I think I saw it much later than that. And I was like, oh, there are murders.
I think I had a similar experience where I think this was one of those films where I don't fully remember how I watched it for the first time. It was definitely when I was still living with my parents, so when I was a teenager, probably around the time it came out. Might have even gone to see it in the cinema at that time. And then whenever it kind of came up, I would just let it play. It was one of those films that I would just never turn off. Most of all, I remember, and it is completely burned into my mind, the bathtub scene between Tom and Dickie. So it was basically Jude Law, you know. Maybe that's where my fetish for like British men started. It's led me down some really troublesome paths, but you know, I'm gonna blame Jude Law for that. I feel like it's one of those films that has only been really recognized for being as good as it actually is pretty much in the age of streaming, because I really get the whiff that, and having kind of read a lot of reviews and stuff around it at the time, I feel like it wasn't considered great. Like, it was good, but it felt like it was a film, you know, with some hot people from the late 90s that everybody was like, oh yeah, remember that thing? Oh yeah, wasn't Matt Damon was a bit weird and Jude Law was very hot. We remember that thing. But I think it's gained quite a much larger appreciation as the years have gone by.
Yeah. I think it's also that thing of, what did Harry Styles say when he was at the Hello Darling stuff? He's like, you know, it feels like a movie.
It's a movie.
It feels like it's a movie. But this film is like, oh yeah, it's a film. This is a real film. Like, it's, everyone looks regular, beautiful but regular. They have like their regular face. The costuming's impeccable. The lighting's impeccable. They're on location. And it you can feel it. It feels very real. And I think that's the thing that sometimes is missing in films we get today, or bigger films we get today, especially films that are full of stars, that are full of, like, you know, even young up-and-comers. There's this tangible thing that's missing.
Yes. And also faces.
Yeah, just faces actual individual real.
Yes.
Even the extras, even all that stuff, like everything's thought, like there's details in a very specific way that I think sometimes doesn't happen as often maybe nowadays. So I think that's why when you watch it, you're like, oh, this is like, I don't know, I'm in this.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk a little bit more about Tom Ripley first. Do you think of Tom Ripley as a serial killer figure?
You know, I don't really know why. Because clearly, I mean, he's killed, he will kill again. Like, it's his, you know, he gets pretty good at it. He does a lot of killing. But I feel like there's never really it's always like a answer to a problem rather than a calculated, he gets no enjoyment out of it. It's just a problem solver for him. It's like, oh, there's this issue now, and I feel like this is the easiest way to take care of that. So, I mean, I don't think, to be fair, I don't think that really comes into play with the serial. It's like, I think it's just how many people you've killed. I think once you've killed multiple people, you definitely are a serial killer. But unlike other movie serial killers we see, it's not a vendetta. It's not, there's no enjoyment in it. It's not like a weird fetish. It's just an answer to a problem.
Yeah, there's a thing in the third book, Ripley's Game, where he says, well, it's written that Tom Ripley doesn't enjoy murder unless it's completely necessary. So very much kind of echoing what you were just saying of it's only a solution to a problem. However, I do think that watching a lot of these movies, one of the things that comes into play a lot is kind of the different fantasies of the serial killer, right? Murder is really just a way for them to recreate or create into the real world the fantasy that they have of themselves, of some particular like sexual fantasy or something else. And I think, again, like we were talking before, having been swimming in the dark waters of the Ripley character in books and movies for a long while I was researching, I think he's got a really clear fantasy. It comes a lot into play, a lot more in the books than in the TV show, and here it's a bit more romantic, I find, but killing them becomes a reluctant way to get closer to that fantasy. And a lot of it has to do with, I think, money and class and travel, and kind of this idea of who he might be if he just had the things that other people have. Right.
There's definitely a feeling in this film that he's kind of like how it feels when he murders someone. He's like, okay, I'll just do this one more murder and then I'll be done.
Yeah.
And then I'll be living this life. He's like, okay, I'll do this. Okay, I'll do this one.
Yeah.
And then I'll stop. He's like a smoker. He's like, okay, I'll have one more.
And then I definitely won't kill from Monday. When Monday comes, no more killing.
That's it. I'm off killing for the foreseeable. And he just can't. You know, like any addict, he just can't. So, it's fascinating in this because it does feel, you can feel that with everyone. He's just like, oh God, okay, fine, I'll do this one. And it is his immediate like answer. He's like, I guess I have to murder them.
Yes.
There's no other solution. Like he doesn't think there's no other, he doesn't like make a pro and con list. He's literally like, oh, okay, well, this minor inconvenience has happened, so I guess I have to kill them now.
So how is Tom Ripley characterized in this film? And I just want to preface this by saying, I really do think that this film is a stone cold masterpiece. And out of all of the adaptations of the Ripley novels, and particularly the Talented Mr. Ripley novel, which is the first one in the Ripleyade series by Patricia Highsmith, I genuinely think this is, film-wise, not TV-wise, is the best adaptation and endlessly rewatchable, which is why I wanted to cover it. And I think I wanted to get your thoughts on how Tom Ripley is characterized here, because I think it's very unique compared to the other movies.
Well, yeah, it's very sympathetic of him, because in the books he is like very cold, and it starts with regret, right? The whole film starts with him saying that He wishes he could go back. If only he hadn't borrowed that jacket. Like, it starts with his regret immediately, right? So we already know whatever terrible things are coming, he wishes he could take it all back. And it's an accident. He's wearing a jacket to help a friend out playing the piano. He's this good guy. He's helping someone out. We don't get any sense of his, like, criminal activities. Like, in the film, it doesn't seem like he really has any. He mentions to Dickie that his talents are, like, forging signatures and stuff, but we don't really... We see it with when he takes on Dickie's as a person, but, like, we don't see it before that. And there's that amazing musical cue whenever he gets an idea to lie. It's like every time he lies. And so there's this, and he has jobs, right? He works in he's like a bathroom attendant guy, and you can see that he's like, it's that thing of like, if only he had the chance that all these other people had, this probably wouldn't be his life, because he's trying and he's working hard, and if only. It's quite sympathetic to him, I think, as a person. And I think also because I actually forgot how, like, gay this film. It's not the idea, like, I knew they were like, but I was like, oh, he's like, I mean, I don't know, he's like fully, like, some of the stuff he says, I was like, oh, okay, we are not even really trying to hide this.
This is a fully, like, he is characterized fully as a closeted gay man, and in a way that no other adaptation has done so explicitly, and neither does the book. In the book, he's written as kind of being attracted to both men and women, but I think my interpretation is that he is kind of perhaps more attracted to men in the book, but he kind of isn't attracted to anyone, because he's very conflicted about, like, the way that he wants Dickie, and he's very, very aggressively repelled by Marge, although, you know, who wouldn't be in the book, not in this film. So I think that he's always either gay or coded as gay or bisexual in the book, even though Patricia Highsmith then on the record went multiple times, including in Sight and Sound in 1980. She was like, he's not gay, he's married. Okay, what are you on about? He's not gay. Patricia, honey. What are you on about?
It's because he keeps saying, in the book he says stuff like, you know, it's perverts. It's like, why do you keep mentioning this in a very weird way, in a way that's like, and the beautiful, perfect line in the book where he's like, I like girls. And you're like, okay, hon. But like, sure. You know how people who like girls, how authors just always saying how they like girls. But in the I think I forgot how, like, I was like, oh, it's really there. So I think that plays into, like, the kind of tragedy of his story. He's, like, very sympathetic, because you're just like, yeah, he's this, like, closeted gay man who really would like a very specific life. Yes, the money and the traveling, all this stuff, but with Dickie or with a man, he'd like to be doing all this stuff with a romantic partner and just, like, not have to murder anyone anymore, you know. To be a gay man in Italy without having to murder anybody. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so I feel like it's set up for us to be a little bit on his side, right? You're like, oh, if he could only just do this, and if he could only just get this right, then it'd be fine.
And I really think this adaptation underplays the whole lifestyle thing significantly. So, you know, he's very on the page and in other films very enamored by the lifestyle of Dickie Greenleaf and his cohort of pals, right? They're rich, they're kind of, they don't have to worry about everything, they just gallivant about Europe doing not much really. They never have to worry about money, whereas Tom he's poor, you know, he's constantly working menial jobs, he is scraping by, and in the books at least he's also like running these, he's not doing honest work like he is in this film. He's like running low level cons, and here I think he falls in love more with Dickie than with Dickie's lifestyle, whereas in other adaptations it's more like he actually doesn't like Dickie that much. It was more the life that he envied. And I know that this is a character that really appears more towards the end, but it feels like a good moment really to talk about Peter Smith Kingsley, who's a character that I think we don't talk about as much when we talk about the talented Mr. Ripley. Do you think that that relationship, what do you think of that relationship and that final murder?
I think so. Peter in the film is really interesting because he's a small part in the book, right? He's like a fleeting person in the book, I think, I believe.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about him in the film is that attraction is there. And he like meets, I don't know what he says. Hell yes, when they meet at the opera. And he's like, he says to him like, oh, I thought you were coming to Venice. And Tom's like, oh yeah, no, that changed. And Peter is like, I was looking forward to row you around. And I didn't know that sentence could like carry so much innuendo. But I was just like, oh, this is the day. Peter's like, I thought we could spend some quality time together. It's like very clear the attraction there immediately. And he's an interesting character because that he actually feels like Tom's happily ever after. It's like, if you hadn't been so enamored by Dickie and you just met this guy, would you be having more of the life you kind of wanted to? Because he's just this very sweet man who really likes you, who seems more interested in things you're actually interested in, who you actually like being around. You don't need to like beg for attention or approval. Yes. And it feels like this what's so tragic about it is it feels like this missed opportunity. Like if he had just met this guy and they had just gone on their trips together and you know, would he be living an entirely different life? And so at the end, when he's probably his longest period of not killing someone, like towards the end, when he's on a boat with Peter, and you think, okay, like maybe this is the time he's going to have that. He's finally going to start this life where he's so relaxed, he's having fun, like he's left all of that behind him, like, and he's just like, okay, I'm with this person now who he doesn't need to pretend with anymore. And then stupid Meredith is on the boat and ruins everything. But like it is well, Kate Blanchett, of course, ruins everything. And then I do think it is the saddest because it's the one he's most reluctant about. Totally. It's like not in a fit of rage, it's not to clear up it's to clear up an issue, but he really doesn't want to. He really, like, he even tries before he does it to avoid doing it by saying, let's just stay in the room, like, for the rest of the trip. Like, I feel like if he could have found a way, that's the one time he tried to think of a plan that wasn't murder. Yes. He was like, maybe this time. But I feel like if he could have thought of a way, or if it was easier to kill Meredith than Peter, he would have done that also. But he couldn't. So it is definitely sad because you feel like he just narrowly missed out on the life he was actually like looking for the whole time. Yeah,
I feel like you nailed it there when you said that Peter really is the possibility of a happy ending for Tom, and also is that he's the only one who hits on Tom first, you know? He doesn't need to grovel to be liked by him in the way that he does with Dickie, and he's not instantly repellent to him like he is to Freddy. And it's so deeply sad, and also the way that Minghella films that murder is also feels like there's so much shame wrapped up in that particular killing, because you just hear Jack Davenport's, the actor's voice as he's saying all these nice things about Tom. And suddenly he's like, oh, Tom, you're crushing me. And you just hear the struggle as you see Tom come back into the boat cabin where they've been staying together. And it's so heartbreaking. And that's the last shot of the movie. It's this cracked, it's this kind of cracked reflection where he's just sitting there and he's kind of replaying this murder in his head, and he's alone, and the closet doors just close on him and the film ends. It's so devastating. And I know he's a killer and a con artist and all this jazz, but like you were saying, he's played so sympathetically. And this particular murder is the only one that is not out of rage and is not kind of in self-defense. It is just to wrap up loose ends, and it feels so painful.
It's really bleak because, you know, also now he thought he'd left Dickie Greenleaf behind, right? Like he got to be him, and now he has to be Dickie again. Yeah, because Meredith's there, and he doesn't know how long for, right? Yes. So suddenly it's just like the step back of like, oh, I just have to. and it's all his own doing, of course, but it still feels very sad for him to have to like step back into playing somebody else when he thought he was like, what's that, when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. And it's just, it's really bleak. It's a really sad ending.
And what do you think of Matt Damon, of how he plays Tom Ripley, and how does his off-screen Matt Damon persona come into play for this character?
Matt Damon's young Matt Damon's... what am I going to say about Matt Damon? Do I dislike Matt Damon? I don't think so. I feel like Matt Damon now and young Matt Damon are entirely two different people. Okay. And the same way about Leonardo DiCaprio. Mm-hmm. So young Matt Damon was just this very exciting actor to me, like in a way that he definitely isn't now. But like he was this very exciting character because he was just this like you sent me a profile of him, which is really interesting, which talks about how it's just this thing of like he always plays someone who's like smarter than his means, like should be doing better than his means. Yes. Right? Like that's often his part. And obviously like because he looks so young in this, which I'm glad that profile clarified, because this came out after Saving Private Ryan, which I did because he looks so young in it. So
to put it into context, this film was shot in 98, came out in 99, and you know, Matt Damon had been sort of trying to act from the late 90s after he dropped out of Harvard. You know, that's part of his lore. It was him and Ben Affleck, buddy. So they made Good Will Hunting. He was still auditioning for roles. They hadn't really broken through with that movie yet. So in a period of 3 years, so Good Will Hunting 97, wrote the screenplay with his old buddy Ben, starred in it in the title role. They won an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay, those two young motherfuckers. Then he was cast in the Spielberg film Saving Private Ryan. He was also cast in The Rainmaker, which was another kind of a John Grisham style legal drama where he also had the lead. And then he did Rounders with Ed Norton in 98. So he was like broken through as a leading man, and he was always a nice guy, sort of a slightly like that profile, which is fully accessible online. It's an interview that they did in The Independent in 98 in promoting the release of The Talented Mr. Ripley. And it's a lot about how, isn't Matt Damon just a nice guy who's getting all this nice success, and he's always playing like really smart, nice people who are just maybe a bit too smart for their own good, and they're kind of underachievers, but you know, they will break through in the end because he's nice and he's smart and he's very wholesome. So something like Talented Mr. Ripley, where he's playing a closeted gay con artist serial killer, is not the film that anybody expected him to make in this like run of leading roles.
Right. But in the same way, it makes sense because he's kind of like this everyman, right? And you have to believe at the very least that Tom Ripley he's not part of the club that like Dickie and Freddie are part of, but he could be. He's this all-American boy that all of that stuff that's like, you know, the being gay and being a con artist and like aspiring murderer, like it's all under there, but you would never know. Like, and I feel like in this, he's kind of plays it he's quite pathetic in it in a way, in his desperation for Dickie and desperation to be part of this, like, whatever. And it's all under the surface. You don't know until he's saying it, until it's happening, that's all there. Like, for the characters in the film, I mean, like, they don't know that all of this stuff that he's thinking exists until he says it, because he's just some guy. He's just kind of this dork, this, like, Dickie calls him boring. Like, just before he's murdered, Dickie calls him boring. And that's who he is to them. He's just this nobody. He's just this boring nobody.
I think we've seen enough of each other for a while. What? You can be a leech. You know that. And it's boring. You can be quite boring.
And so I think it fits with Matt Damon just because he is kind of this everyman. Even like, I just realized I forgot about the film Dogma entirely, but like,
how dare you?
How dare I? How ridiculous. What a crazy thing to do. And even in that incredibly insane, like wacky film, he's like kind of the nicer guy. He's a bit like, like he's kind of, I don't know.
Out of the two murderous angels, he's the least murderous angel.
Yeah. He kind of like, it drives me a bit mad being like that, because like, it's not always his natural, like whatever it is. And so I think he is always like, there's something very grounded about him.
So that's actually, I think, something that goes against him in this role, because, and their profile is really interesting because he says this thing like, oh, you know, he's just misunderstood, he just made the wrong choice, and he's not really a bad guy, about Tom Ripley. And I'm like, Matthew, sweetie, did you what? And I think this need, and perhaps it's also the moment when this was filmed, right? And I wonder, again, I'm completely making this shit up. This is based on just my opinion, so everything is a legend and is entirely just my take. I do find it really interesting, like when an actor, and you tell me, like as an actor as well, if you're on a run where you be like, this is your big break, sweetie. You've got 5 movies, you're the lead in every one of them. You just won an Oscar for your first movie that you wrote with your buddy. You need to make the right choices because we're creating the Matt Damon star persona. And the Matt Damon star persona is good, smart boy from Boston, right? And I think even the way that he plays Tom, and obviously this, you know, the way that the character is adapted comes from Minghella and the way that he adapted the book, and it's a brilliant adaptation in its own right. But Damon, I don't think he ever really lets go on screen. I think he's so a product of Hollywood, you know, in a sense to where he's trying to do good by everyone. Not saying this is a negative, it's more of a descriptor. Like he's just trying to be the best boy for whoever is his road to success, you know? And I think he's really good at playing that neediness in Tom, but I definitely do not, like there's nothing sort of calculating about him. So the conning, the grifting, the forgery aspect of Tom Ripley is kind of a complete byproduct. Like that doesn't matter as much in this film because that requires a calculation that I don't think Damon gives his interpretation of the character.
You know, that's actually a really good observation. Like, I think that is part of Matt Damon. There's an element of characters he plays where it's like, I would like to be liked somehow, always.
Yes.
And that's definitely there. Whereas in the book, he doesn't care about being liked so much. He mostly wants to be left alone and rich. Like, that's it. But like, there's definitely a feeling of him, even by people, like, he even wants like Freddie to like him, kind of, like, even though he doesn't like Freddie. Like, do you mean he wants to be liked always? And I think that is a Matt Damon. Like, I think the leading man that he was, when he was younger, when he was getting those roles one after the other, I think this was his attempt to do what a lot of young actors do now, which is do, like Robert Pattinson did it, do the weird thing, and then I'll be out of that bubble and I can do more of what I want to do. I think you have to have an element of being kind of a genuine weird guy, like the Skarsgård boys or whatever. That has to be there already. And I don't think Matt Damon really has the range for that. So he can never make Ripley as disgusting as he actually needs to be in some of the moments, right? Like, and
he can't make him scary. He's not scary.
No, he's quite, like, the way he flinches when Jude Law like attacks him, like in the book, it's like he's just a little boy. He's not really this person who is like
a menace or a criminal.
And there needs to be, like, if the answer to a question you have or an issue you have is murder, you're not a good person. There probably is something quite disgusting about your personhood, and we never really see it. It's these quite like clean murders, these quite like, oh no, he had to, but like, it's like, do you know what it takes to murder someone and get like think about what to do with their body. Like there has to be like, he has to be a little bit gross. He has to be a little bit frightening. There has to be something cold there a little bit. And he can't quite let go enough to give us that, because Matt Damon, the actor, as well as Tom Ripley, the character in this film, are always trying to be liked. Always.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But you know who does let go? Is Mr. Jude Law.
Mr. Jude Law, my goodness.
So let's talk about the supporting cast, because I'm of the opinion that the supporting cast of The Talented Mr. Ripley is what makes this film. Like 90% of the reason why we like remember this film, while we're still talking about it, where it's become kind of so continuously talked about and lauded, is because of the supporting cast for two reasons. One, all of those people became super mega famous and successful. Like Jude Law, Philip Seymour Hoffman, R.I.P., Gwyneth Paltrow, Cate Blanchett, you know, Matt Damon obviously was already, as we've discussed, like a rising star, but he's continued to be a massive movie star. And all of them are just on the cusp of breaking out. And the timing of this is also very significant. So this is 99. Gwyneth will win the Oscar for Shakespeare in Love this year, because that is a 98 film, I believe. She's in this film because she was a protege of Harvey Weinstein, as we know. And this is a Weinstein production. It's the same reason why Matt Damon was cast in this film, is because he was very much in that little circle of golden people chosen by Weinstein, and Weinstein really wanted to work with Anthony Minghella after he won every single Oscar for The English Patient. So there's a lot of stuff that is of the 90s indie movie making politics behind the reason for this film existing. But then what do you think about how the core supporting characters of Dickie, Freddie, and Marge are played, and does the film kind of make us think that they sort of deserve what they get?
Oh, absolutely they do. Like, they're like, look at, aren't these guys bad? Aren't these guys annoying and gross? We should kill them. Like, that's the that's the film the whole time. Shouldn't we murder them, guys? Like, that's them. But Dickie especially, because what's really good about casting Jude Law is just because he is just so beautiful and he is charismatic. You fully understand, right? So it's almost not Tom's fault that he feels the way he does and gets so sucked into Dickie's world, because who wouldn't, right? Who wouldn't meet this guy, this tanned, like, I don't know, Italian-speaking Lothario who likes jazz and is like out all the time, whatever, who plays chess in the bath. Like, who would not fall in love with that man? Like, of course Tom did. So it's not Tom's fault, right?
It's not Tom's fault that Jude Law is this amount of hot. And can we just discuss everything you've just said? When you just say, oh, he's like this American rich boy who likes to play chess in the bath and loves jazz and wears like linen shirts and drives a little scooter around Italy. I'm like, that sounds fucking gross. I hate him. I hate him on sight. But then if you put a picture of Jude Law in front of me in this movie, I'm like, I get it. I too would commit a murder.
Right? On paper, I'm like, no. And then if I was in Italy and that man would try to move to me, I'd be like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Are we married? What are we doing? I don't know. What do you want to do? Anything you say.
To quote you back to you, Isaura, he could take a shit on my floor and I'd say thank you.
I would be like, thank you, please, more. Like, I would take no issue with it. I mean, like, it's ridiculous. Took me out on his boat one time. I'd be like, I don't know. My morals would be out the window. In fact, Matt Damon is better than me, because if Jude Law sat in a bath in the same, I was like, come in, play some chess. I'd be like, I'm getting in. There is no scenario in the world where this is happening and I'm not in the bath with, like, you're in danger. Like, he has the willpower of, I don't know, because the fact that he even asked, I was like, I'd be, like, undressing, like, I'd make it seem like it was the most normal thing, and I'd be like, no, obviously I'm getting, how crazy, dude, of course I'm getting in the bath. Like, if I was Matt Damon, I would have been pitching to, like, the director, like, I would have been like, I feel like, do you not think you should be in the bath with him? No, you don't?
Just for rehearsals, just one time. Just
Should
one
we
time.
do one take where I'm in the bath just to see how it feels? Maybe I'm rubbing his back, maybe he's rubbing mine. I don't know, something. But there's definitely a sense of, we went on a real Jude Law tangent there. Definitely a sense of him deserving it. And they show us by like, even the way he talks to Tom when he first sees him, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's like, you're so white. Which
Isn't he so white, Marge? Look at him.
Which is funny because he is. But
also, he's wearing lime green shorts. Lime green.
But it's this immediate thing that's so be so impolite, so like mean to say to someone on the, like first meeting them. Like it would immediately put them on the back foot. It's all the stuff he sees him with this Italian girl that he's like sleeping with also. Marge obviously doesn't know about. And so there's definitely this thing of like, oh, Dickie's like pretends to be this guy, but actually he's this guy. He's this lying, like unkind, unless you're like one of his friends, he doesn't really like care about you. And he's ungrateful. I think that's the biggest thing, right? He has all this stuff and he's ungrateful. Yeah. Like there's much less, you know, in the books, he's like, Dickie's like trying to be a painter. He's like, you know, he really wants to be an artist in some description. And in this, he's actually quite talented in the film. He can play like, you know, the saxophone. Is it the saxophone he plays?
It is, yeah.
And he knows jazz. He doesn't just like jazz. He knows it, right? He's good at it. He's really into it in a way that actually feels like passionate. So he's not actually failing in that sense, in the way that I think so it's just ungratefulness. He's mad at his father, the way he joins in with Tom, like, and conning his father a little bit. Yeah. He's just like, ha ha ha. like, and so I think there is a sense of like entitled rich boy who doesn't understand. And also, I do think, which this is the first time, the last 3 times I watched it, which was like the last 2 weeks, was the first time I realized, I was like, not explicitly, and not that it's an excuse to murder someone, boys and girls, if you're listening, but he does lead Tom on a little bit. The bathtub scene.
Yes.
Like I said, yes, he says no to Tom getting in, but why did that scene, how did that start in the first place? Like, I think Tom
he enjoys the
there.
Attention.
Yeah,
he enjoys the attention from Marge. He enjoys the attention from Tom. He enjoys the attention from the fruit seller woman from the Italian village, from Montebello. You know, he enjoys the attention, and as soon as he doesn't want it, he's like a cat, right? Or he's like, yes,
he's
pet
like
me. And it's like, oh, I don't want you to touch me anymore. Get the fuck out. I'm going to scratch you. That's who Dickie is. And when the scene in the boat, which is the scene of the murder of Dickie Greenleaf, which is kind of, there's 3, I'd say, core things in The Talented Mr. Ripley that kind of exist in all the adaptations, and that is the scene where Tom is caught by Dickie trying on his clothes, the murder of Dickie Greenleaf, and the murder of Freddie Miles. Those, whichever way you interpret everything else, the different adaptations have done different things. Those will always remain. And in the murder of Dickie Greenleaf in this film is pretty unique because it is, first of all, it's savage the way that it's done. It's really bloody. It's really extended. Like, he cracks open Jude Law's head, but he doesn't die, and he like lunges at Tom again, and he's covered in blood, and he looks psychotic. Like you could almost argue, and I'm not arguing this, but you could make the argument that it is kind of self-defense, really, because like Dickie is fully lunging at him with this psychotic expression in his face and screaming in his face and trying to strangle him. It's like, you know what? Okay, like, it's a lot, right? Maybe you do deserve a little oar to the head. But it's so insulting. It's so hurtful. He yells at him. He insults him. He says that he's a leech, that he's boring, that he hates being around him, hates looking at him. Yeah. And I'm like, fucking hell, you're really taking a lot of pleasure in humiliating Tom.
You're lying to Marge, and then you're getting married to her. You're knocking up Sylvana. You're ruining everybody. You want to play the sax. You want to play the drums. Which is it, Dickie? What do you actually play? Who are you? Huh? Some third-class mooch? Who are you? Who are you to say anything to me? Who are you to tell me anything? Actually, I really, really do not want to be on this boat with you. I can't move without you moving gives me the creeps. You give me the creeps. Can't move
Shut up.
without Dicky, like a little girl all the time. Shut up!
And so what he seemed to be unaware of this whole time, which is that Tom was pining for him, he's like fully aware of.
Totally.
Which is like, so in the bath, because he gets out the bath in front of Tom, tells him to get in. It's like, well, that's not an accident. And then he like knows Tom's watching him. He just kind of flicks a towel at him. I'm just like, you like this. So then when Tom, bless Tom's heart, he's in the boat, like fully planning their life together. Like, so we can have a place here and there, and then we'll be between both. And I know what you're thinking. The Marge problem is like, oh, honey, I don't think he's thinking that. Like, you're living in a different...
You're living in a fantasy.
Yeah. And then when he starts getting mad at Dickie and he's just like, you're ruining people's lives, and, you know, what he brings up the bar, he's like, us playing chess, like, and Dickie says, when are you to win? He's like, acts like he doesn't even remember it. Full gaslighting. So it's interesting because it is definitely set up of like, I love that we're like, yeah, me, you, and Miguel are like, yeah, he had to. Dickie led him on. And then it was
justified.
Self-defense.
It's justified.
He had to do it. There was no other option. But it definitely lends itself to that, where Tom's trying to explain himself, and he thinks it in a lover's spat. You can tell by that he thinks they're just having an argument between him and his mutually interested partner, right? Someone who eventually is going to get to the place he's at. And so when Dickie lunges at him, like initially before he's been hit, Dickie kind of like fakes going to punch him, and he fully cringes. He really isn't expecting it. And then what sends him over the edge, the last thing Dickie says to him before he hits him with the oar is like, you're like a girl, whining at me, Dickie, 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 like a girl. And that's when he hits him. And
you know what? Fuck Dickie. In this film, he deserves to be murdered.
Dickie had it coming. And so it's just this it feels like the reason he kills him is this realization that this whole time Dickie actually has not been on the same page.
Yes.
Which is
it's
a surprise to
devastating.
him. Yeah. He thought they understood what they were doing, and then it was like, oh,
we weren't actually on the same page. And what about the other murder, the murder of Freddie Miles, played here by the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman?
I mean, just the best entrance, screeches onto screen.
Always the best entrances.
He's just loud and obnoxious. He's just this very specific type of rich person that I think all of us can recognize. Doesn't apologize for being who he is, feels no shame in being who he is. Is part of lots of people probably find Freddie pretty annoying, but he's part of the club, so he's fine. He's never going to be worried about his place in the world. He's never going to think he doesn't belong somewhere, or that he's too loud or too brash for somewhere. He can just do whatever he wants, and he is played by perfection by Philip Seymour Hoffman, and you can tell instantly. Again, we're on the side of Tom. I would also hate him. If that man, the opposite effect to Dickie, if that man approached me in Italy, I'd be like, oh my God, no, please, no. Like,
and also he has the most, there's a scene where him and Dickie are listening to records in like a listening booth in a record shop, and Tom is like, oh, we're going to be late for the train, or I want to go and see some art, and we're in Florence, let's go. And Freddie just looks at him. He doesn't say anything. He just looks him up and down, and it's the most demeaning stare anyone's ever given anyone on screen. And Philip Seymour Hoffman just has this thing where every single supporting character he's ever played just completely steals the show and elevates the film by about 1,000 degrees. I'm thinking of like Almost Famous, Along Came Polly. I don't know if this is not the audience.
Oh, I love Along Came Polly.
I only love it because of him.
Yeah, when he's giving the speech at the end of the board. Oh my God, perfection.
He's
great.
And especially Freddie Miles, like, holy shit, the way he just gets out of that car in his entrance, and like he's sort of, you know, making his way to this bar, and he like looks at these women and says something disgusting, and then lifts up his sunglass, and he's like, Dickie. Oh, he's phenomenal. And then with the whole like, how's the peeping, Tommy?
How's the peeping, Tommy?
Oh, and he does it in this like guttural way. It's like, how's the peeping, Tommy?
Tommy, how's the peeping? Tommy? That's a peeping. Tommy.
All these little asides, and basically he sees right through Tom immediately. He clocks him immediately as not one of them. He has no time for him at all. Even once Dickie's dead and Freddy turns up to the apartment, right? And he walks in and he says... He just quietly devastates Tom repeatedly. So Tom's playing this new piano he's bought with his newfound wealth. And Freddy walks over, slings his coat on it, and then starts like just pressing random keys. And Tom's on edge. He moves his coat, and then he's just like, "Oh, it's a new piano. You probably shouldn't." And every time he tries to finish a sentence, he just presses a key again, like looking at him. I'm like, this man doesn't think you're anything. He literally thinks you're less than nothing. Yeah. And then when he calls the deck, he's like, "Did this come furnished?" Because he doesn't look like Dickie. Says he calls it bourgeois, and it's like he's like, you don't have taste. Like, whoever did this has a mindset, okay, it doesn't have taste, right? He's in the club and he knows like a phony when he sees one,
which is a really interesting thing because, and here's where I'd like to talk a little bit more about the book, maybe, because you've read the books, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, I read the first one. I haven't read.
Yeah, so the taste thing is really interesting because you're totally right. In this film, Tom doesn't really have the best taste. He's kind of is like, he's not even bourgeois. He's not even new money. He's just kind of like a tourist, like an American tourist in Europe. He's, with his little guidebook everywhere. So he's instantly clocked by Freddy and so on for not really belonging in that space. But in the books and in other adaptations, it's them who are really gauche and really tasteless and just have money but no actual ability to use it in an elegant way. Like, they have no elegance.
Right.
And it's Tom who very quickly learns and develops a very refined sense of taste, and then he sort of builds this life for himself where actually he's being a better Dickie Greenleaf than Dickie was.
Right.
And I find that really interesting because here it's so much more about him being in love with Dickie despite all of Dickie's assholeness than it is about him wanting to be rich and leading a rich man's life.
Yeah, and he's only embarrassed by those things. Like, I think at some point Freddie makes a comment about his corduroy jacket, and he's embarrassed about that because Freddie's brought it up where he didn't seem to be aware of it before.
Yeah.
And it's just like suddenly this person who could like basically takes a pin to like Tom's balloon, and it's just like, oh, you can't even pretend to be one of us. You don't have the range to be one of us. And it's the book is interesting because the difference is that Tom in the book has this real appreciation for art and real appreciation for beautiful things. And he like agonizes over them, and the detailing of stuff that he buys for the house or the house he moves into is like really specific. And he's really appreciating all the details. He's like, when he buys a place in Venice, especially all the details of that house that it goes through, like how beautiful all of it is.
That's the stuff that makes him happy as well. Like, he is fully happy to just be surrounded by art and beautiful things, and kind of a very old world kind of art.
Yeah.
Very old world kind of beauty and elegance that he does not have or can get in America. And I think arguably the book presents us with this idea that it's different kinds of elegance and richness that exist in America versus Europe,
right?
Which could only really come from, and let me get on my little Highsmith high horse for a second here. It can only really come from someone like her, like the author who was an American who traveled around Europe for a long time when she was younger. And then eventually moved and lived in Europe permanently. So they're like the American in Europe thing, particularly at that time. And the novel is set in the 50s, was published in 55, I think, the first one. Like, that is a really important thing that the film doesn't really delve into, or is not interested enough in it. And I think partly it's because Minghella was an Englishman, so for him kind of this American vision of Europe as an old glorious, elegant world just doesn't really exist if you are familiar with it, if it's close enough, if you're here, if you can touch it and you can see it without any huge expense. But like both in the book and in the movie, someone like Tom would never be able in his life be able to afford to go to Europe, let alone travel around the different countries or live there and just visit museums and go to art and eat and drink and have a merry old time. And I think this like we call them expats now, but kind of this vision of the American youth traveling and learning the European ways is very off its time. And I remember reading, there's an essay that Highsmith wrote for Granta magazine about the inspiration for Ripley, the character. And, you know, she talked about this young man that she saw at like 6 a.m. from she was traveling around Italy, so in one of these small towns on the coast, and it was 6 a.m. and she was looking outside her balcony and she just saw this one young man by himself walking down the beach that early in the morning. And she had this idea of, she never met him, she never knew anything about him, but she sort of instinctively knew that he might have been or probably was American. And she started kind of formulating, obviously it kind of grew into other things, but in her diaries, she also makes a note of this image and of this one idea of kind of, and she says in her diaries, of this young American man, half homosexual, being in Italy and kind of being dumb enough to be a patsy for criminals, or kind of being the sort of guy who could be used by European criminals. And obviously that was just the germ, and then it developed into something completely different. But I love that essay in the way that she describes just projecting or knowing instinctively that that was another American tourist in Europe.
Right. I think that's so interesting, because obviously in the book, the Americans that are there, like Dickie and Marge, are there to find some sort of depth, right?
Yes.
In the book, Freddie is a playwright, which this Freddie we can't even imagine. I mean, I can't even imagine this Freddie being a playwright.
Totally.
But they're all there trying to make some depth, make some stories about their life, right? To have done something so they can write about something or paint something, whatever, to give themselves like more dimensions. And what's interesting in the book as well, because Tom already has those, just because he's been poor, and I think it's a really astute observation in the book, because it's just like, oh, these things that like a lot of rich people crave, like why people with privilege like crave oppression and stuff like that, because they think it makes you more interesting. There's that beautiful line in Moonrise Kingdom where when the two like kids have run away together, and she says she always wished she was an orphan, and the boy says to her, but you don't know what you're talking about. It's this imagined depth that comes with hardship. And Tom appreciates all these things because his world is actually just like, yes, sharper, but it has way more dimensions in theirs. He sees much more of it. He sees much more of what people are actually like. And the people that, I mean, I think in the book they talk about he talks about Van Gogh like a lot, and in the series, the TV one that's just come out, he talks about Caravaggio a lot.
Yes.
And it's like, yes, because he would have had a lot more in common with these people that were living in these places and creating these things. Tom's actually more like them. And in this, it does get flattened out a bit that he's the boring one somehow, even though he's working a million jobs, even though he exists in more places than any of them. And he has to try harder and work harder and all this stuff. He somehow comes across as less interesting, which I do think that's like a missed point in the film. Even the stuff like they're changing what Dickie's interested in from painting to jazz, because I guess it felt more like a modern, more understandable thing. And visually, I guess maybe would read more interestingly, but like even that, I'm just like, oh, I think there's a misunderstanding of what he's doing there, like of what the book Dickie is doing there, which is trying to add depth, and he would have this in America. He has no like less access to jazz in America. Like, so It's
well, I guess it makes Dickie actually even more unlikable because he's not even interested in trying to do anything.
Right. And I think that's what takes it, because the point is that Dickie doesn't need to be unlikable, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's just like, he could still be wasting his time and his life in. It's still kind of pathetic, him trying to find himself in these ways. He's like terrible at what he's doing, whatever. But in this, it's just like, oh, he just likes jazz, I guess. And it's not even opera. It's not even something where you'd be like, well, it makes sense he's in Italy because he loves opera or something. It's just like, he's just bumming around. There's no plan.
Yeah, he's just a bum.
Anything. Yeah, he's just a bum.
The only person that retains that desire to kind of be an artist in Europe is Marge, sort of, you know. They call her a writer. We haven't really I fucking hate Marge.
You're like saying writer in air quotes, you're like, Marge the writer.
I was trying to be polite, and then I was just like, fucking hate Marge. I hate the way Gwyneth plays her. Actually, that's kind of a testament to how well she plays her, that I hate her so much. Like the whole like fucking Housewives of Montebello shtick that she's got going, when she like goes to pick up Dickie on the beach and she's wearing a fucking apron or something and she's got both hands on her hips. She's like, oh, Mr. Signore Greenleaf. I'm like, shut your fucking face. You're a blonde wasp from Connecticut or whatever. You're the little I don't. What do you think of Marge? Sorry. Just went off.
I love, if you were there, you'd have been like, well, the first murder would have been Marge. I would have started there. Maybe that would have been my order of murders.
I feel like a bad feminist because this is a movie about a fucking serial killer and a disgusting, like two disgusting rich boys who are horrible people, and I'm like, fuck Marge. She's the worst one.
Oh no, but then we have Meredith there to balance it out, because I love how Cate Blanchett plays Meredith. But like, I think Marge. I don't think I ever even really think about Marge. I'm not even sure I know what I think about Marge. Like, she's there. She sure is there. She sure is around. She is just this big nothing. She is of no substance whatsoever. She's just a blonde lady. She is just, like, she doesn't even really have a character. Like, and again, I don't think that's Gwyneth. I think that's how Gwyneth Paltrow plays her. She doesn't even really have any distinct character qualities that I could be like, oh, she's like this. Yeah. She's just there as like Dickie's. Like, Dickie's gonna marry. It's like, is he?
I mean, really?
Is he going to? Do you want to be married to Dickie? Like, and the fact that it's like, would you not know that he's sleeping with Italian? Would you not know? Would you not assume that man is out sleeping with Italian? I would. Yeah. I would. I'd be assumed that's where he was. Every time he wasn't where he said he was going to be, I'd be like, he's having sex with an Italian woman. Yeah. Like, that would be my first thought. Like, obviously.
Well, she's one of the biggest changes from the book as well, isn't she? Because in the book...
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's because I hate Marge in the book. Like, she's such an unlikable presence because she's so up her own ass. She's so like, I'm a writer. I'm like, honey, you're writing a fucking diary, okay? You're writing a fucking diary about being in Italy and like, oh, isn't the scene nice? Isn't it hot in Italy? By Marge.
Italians are very Italian. Like,
my boyfriend's very hot.
My boyfriend, Jude Law. But like, I do think, in the book, she's just a bit more self-serving. She fits in with Freddie and Dickie a lot more. Mm-hmm. In the sense of like, she's a different kind of that, but she is still that. And she's also the person in the book who floats the idea to Dickie that Tom's queer. She's like, he's queer. He's in love with you.
She's full on homophobic in the book as well. Yeah. She's very much like, don't you know? And she says this thing, which is, don't you know what he is?
Yeah, exactly. And although there is a bit in the book where Dickie, like, there's like the acrobats on the beach, which would be impressive. Like, if you saw some men making a human period, of course you'd be watching. And like, so Tom Fairley is going, oh my God, isn't this really cool? And Dickie's like, they're gay. And Tom's like, oh, okay, but still impressive though. And Dickie's like, oh, okay, I'm going to take the other stairs because I don't want to walk next to the
it's
gays.
like, oh, no homo.
Yeah, like, I don't want to be too close in case that someone confuses me, one of them. And so it's just like, there's this underlying with Dickie, but it's Marge who's just like, he's in love with you. And she's not entirely wrong, but like,
She's
still...
not wrong.
But the way she writes about it is like, you know, and in this, she has no suspicion of Tom at all. In this, she's so naive for so long. She's just like, oh, Tom, oh, Dickie this. And she's just so weepy and pathetic. I think that's what's annoying about Marge in this film. She's so pathetic. And it's like, Marge, girl, like, get it together. Like, get it together. Especially when she thinks that Dickie, as far as you know, Dickie's just dumped her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you need to stand up. You need to, like, get yourself right, because if this is how you're behaving all over it, you're like weeping in the opera house because Dickie broke up with you, you need to get over it.
And she has that big moment as well, the big kind of Gwyneth Golden Girl movie star moment of like pummeling Tom's chest and be like, you killed him, I know you killed him.
You're dead. And it's just like, no, you don't. You don't really even know that he's dead or anything. And the bit where she's scared of Tom when he's like saying all stuff about he loves her. He's maniacally walking towards her being like, I love you, Marge. Keep that in a pocket for a rainy day. I love you. And it's just like,
I kind of love that moment though.
Yeah,
I genuinely really love that moment because it is like the absolute lack of planning on Tom's part. Like he's literally just come out the shower. She's found Dickie's cufflinks and she's like, what are these doing here, Tom? She starts to piece things together, which is it is a adaptation choice that I actually really like because it does ramp up the tension between Tom and Marge, because in the book she kind of just like disappears because he keeps writing to her as Dickie. And she's like, well, are you gay for Tom now?
She's like, I'm not some small town girl. I know how these things work.
Yeah.
In the book, she's like, I get it, guys. You're having like bum fun. I understand. Like,
so
I'm not like some baby.
So she's fully like deluded and buys into Tom's lies and kind of lets go of the whole thing, and we never see her again. But here she keeps coming back, being like, where's Dickie? What happened to Dickie? We need to find out what happened to Dickie. And then like when she discovers this, she pieces these two things together, but I think she's so sheltered that she cannot fully fathom that maybe what Tom has done and that maybe he's even killed Freddy to cover up for the fact that he killed Dickie. And in that scene, and I do love this, where he's like, I love you, Marge. Keep that in for a rainy day. I'm very much in love with you, Marge. Don't you see? I'm not just pulling this out of my pocket while I'm naked in front of you and just out of the shower with soap still on my chest. I really do love you, Marge.
I think it's what... Because in the book, she's like, so when, towards the end, when Dickie's dad comes, which also happens in this film, right? Dickie's dad comes to confirm kind of everything, to kind of be a bit like, oh, we think he probably did this and then did it to himself, whatever. In the book, she's just a bit like, he's probably somewhere, like, and then she finds his ring, and it confirms for her more that Dickie killed himself, because she's kind of made her peace with the fact that Dickie and Tom were just basically in a relationship. Yeah, she's like, well, I guess they were together and then Dickie gave you his rings and then murdered himself because he killed Top Freddy. And she kind of makes her peace with that, kind of this like kind of cheery, almost naive way. She's just like, well, either he's run away or like, I don't know, it's really weird. And in this, I think I love also that she pieced it together, because that's in the book. That is one thing that I was a bit like, if I found his rings after, when there's already been a definite confirmed murder, right? Like, well, Freddy, I'd be like, oh, Tom killed everybody. Tom did it. I think that would be my automatic thought. And I like that in this film, she kind of is like, wait a second. I do wish though that she has suspicions of him earlier, because at the first half of the film, she just kind of relates to Tom, like, so much. Like, she's just like, oh, isn't it sad when Dickie pays you attention, then he loses interest in you? Yes. And he becomes like her little friend in a way that, like, I feel like it would have benefited, I think, the film for her to be a little bit more wary of him. This person who's randomly disrupted her life as well as Dickie's. I mean, she was having a lovely little time in Montebello with Dickie this whole time, and he is intruding a little bit, and she's so gracious about it. And I think it does, in the film, it does feel a little bit disjointed to me. She unravels, and you know she's unraveling because she misses Dickie so much, but I kind of don't, that's annoying too. It's like all the time she's unraveling just because she thinks he's like not talking to her. It's just like, I don't know, it's just a bit annoying. But like, it would have been more interesting, I think, for her to have a little bit of like, why are you always here? Why do we just meet you one day on the beach and now you're everywhere? Like, like, because I feel like that wouldn't be like weird. I think anyone it'd be fair for anyone to be like, why are you suddenly like every single place, and why do you suddenly the only person who knows where this one person is?
I think she's really disingenuous in the film because, like you said, you know, suddenly this person is in their lives, and when she is sympathetic towards Tom, I think she's got this thing where she's kind of she has him as a pet, which I think is a very like, I mean, I think it either knowingly or unknowingly taps into a really strange dynamic that continues to exist between like straight women and gay men or like queer men, where they're like treated as pets of the women. And I think she has a bit of that in her, where she's like, oh, isn't it cute you're in love with my boyfriend?
The safe person, right? Who she probably thinks is quite a good influence on Dickie to begin with. Like, she can use him, like when they're in the when Tom's told Dickie that his dad sent him over with money and whatever, and Dickie's now like, okay, getting in on it, being like writing to his dad and saying, I met this guy Tom who I went to Princeton with, and they're trying to get more money out of his dad. And Dickie suggests getting the car with the money. And then Marge comes in like, what about we get an icebox? And she uses Tom to convince Dickie. And so it's very much this like, oh, isn't it fun? Yeah, you're right, to have like this pet. And also it's implied that that she's told Peter about Tom, right? That she's kind of suggested that they should meet, I assume, in a way that she thinks they'd like each other. Because when Peter meets, he's like, I've heard so much about you. And it could only have been from Marge. So there's also this implication that she's like, oh, wonderful. Like, I'll set him up with, like, she knows the two gay guys. And she's like, I'll put them together. But there's definitely an implication that she knows, which is, I guess, why his little speech at the end when he's about to kill her, before, like, but doesn't get a chance to, is so bizarre because it's like so far from reality. She's like, what's happening? He's like, I love you. He's like, no, you clearly don't. I don't know what's going on.
You mentioned the other supporting female character in this film is Meredith, which is a new character unique to this adaptation. She's not in the books, and she's played by Cate Blanchett. You mentioned you love the way that Blanchett plays her.
I love her. She's like a caricature. I love her. She's just like that rich American voice that she does when she first meets him. Oh, how do you do it? Like, she's just like with his packing, and she's just so like, and considering what we know of Cate Blanchett and how like sturdy and forthright she is, she plays this like flighty, like coquettish woman so well. Like, and she sees Matt Damon. he's not boring to her. She is like, oh my God, I want to be all up in that, which makes me wonder immediately. She is like, I am like white on rice. She is like, I would like that very much, thank you. Like, immediately. Yes. She sees him when they get off the boat, and she's like, oh my God, yes, thank you, yum, delicious. And then I don't know what would happen to her if she ever met the real Dickie Greenleaf. My God, she'd pass out. But like, she's in love with him like immediately. And then every scene with her afterwards, she's so there's so much heavy breathing and eye fluttering and hair flicking. She is like, I'm gonna do the classic. She's read her little book of How to Catch a Man, like that probably existed in the 50s. She's like, I've read it, I know exactly what to do. And she is doing every single move. She's like, I know exactly how to play this. And I'm obsessed with her. Like, So she meets Dickie she meets Tom when she comes off the boat, who lies about being Dickie. So she thinks she's met Dickie Greenleaf. And then the next time she sees him is he's in a shop, and she sees him through the window. She's so excited. Oh my God. She's like, Dickie! And it's just like, okay, relax, Meredith. Take it down a notch. We get it. You like him. And she is just fully like, she buys him, she gets him, like, she go to get him his suit tailored and stuff, and then she sees him change. She sees him with his shirt off, and she literally, her mouth is literally hanging open.
He's like, oh, I would like a bit of that hairless whiteness.
Like, she's like a skinny but sinewy Matt Damon. She's like, like, just. Like, she's fully gagged. Like, she is, like, she doesn't know what to do with herself. She's fully flustered every second of this movie.
No one has ever fancied Matt Damon as much as Meredith.
That hard.
Never.
Like, I don't know how that's a testament to what a good actress she is. Because I was like, I know the real Cate Blanchett feels no way about Matt Damon or anyone who looks like Matt Damon. But like, I was sold as her as Meredith. And then at the opera, she keeps like looking over to him and just being like, she's even positioning herself to make sure she looks the best. If he is to turn and look at her, that she looks always perfect. And it's just like, and when he's talking to her mum and she's like, almost like, she's like hyperventilating a little bit because she's already planning the wedding in her head. Yeah. And she's like, my parents like him. This is going fantastic. This is going exactly as I planned. Like, she can barely contain her excitement. Like, if he proposed right then, she would have said yes. And then he breaks up with her and she takes it like a good sport, like a good girl would do when he's like, I just can't stop thinking about Marge. And she's like, oh, okay. And then rests her head on his shoulder. And she does this like walk away that's like, oh no. It's so funny. And when he tells her to meet him the next day, this is my favorite scene of her. Yeah. And he sets it up, right, so that Marge and Peter will be at the cafe at the same time as her. And he's obviously going to stand her up, but she's going to see Marge because Peter knows Meredith. And it's obviously going to confirm all the things, right? All the lies he's told, this is going to confirm it for him. And that scene is... It's one of my favorite scenes maybe ever, because she gets up and goes over, like, and it's just like, oh, you're talking about Dickie? She's like, yes, I was with him at the opera, like, yesterday. And she just, it's like, I feel like she didn't need to say any of it. She could have just left, but she goes over and then it's so dramatic. She's trying so hard. Again, it's like she's read a book on like how to be a woman in this specific time. And it's amazing. Like, she like shake Marge's hand and she's like, nothing happened. There's no reason to stop you getting married. And then when she's leaving, she's like twisting around. She's so flustered. Where's her bag and her scarf? And then Peter goes to get up. She's like, no, don't get up. And she like speeds away. And I'm obsessed with it. It's so dramatic. It's amazing. And it fully feels like she is just like the epitome of a girl at this time whose one singular goal in life is to marry well. And she sees Tom, who she thinks is Dickie, when she gets off the boat, and she's like locked in. She is like, this is it. This is my plan now. I've done it. I found it. This is the whole thing. Probably the reason she's even in Italy is to do exactly this, right? Yeah. Is to find someone who she can marry. Yeah. And I'm obsessed to find a target. With her. Yeah. And even by the end, right, when she sees him on the boat, considering the last time you saw him, he was dumping you and then he stood you up, the fact that, like, they even say, like, when she says, I was meant to meet him here 50 minutes ago, she's like, do you think he meant us to meet here? That would be particularly cruel. She acknowledges that maybe he did that and that'd be really mean of him. But then when she sees him on the boat, she's like, Dickie!
It's like, oh, never mind.
She's like, hello! She hasn't seen him at this point probably in months. And he kisses her and she's just like, ha, I did it, I'm winning. Like, she has no sense of like, maybe I should make it a little bit harder for this man who didn't treat me very well. She's just like, he like just kisses her immediately and she's just like, okay, great.
This'll do. Yeah.
She's like, I'm finally back on track. Can't wait for me and Dickie's marriage. And I'm obsessed with her. I don't know, what a great addition.
I love this. I love this take on her. And I think we'll need to talk about that TV series adaptation in a separate episode because we're running out of time. But before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about the other Tom Ripley film adaptations that are not strictly of The Talented Mr. Ripley, the first novel. Have you seen any of them? What do you make of the different versions of the character?
Anna, I'm not going to lie to you.
Yes.
I didn't know that other versions existed until you told me they did.
Oh my god, no way!
Yeah, so I looked them up this morning and I was like, haha, how fascinating. Like, when I tell you I saw the Jude Law version and this version, and that was it for my brain. Like, it did.
Do you mean when you saw the Andrew Scott version and this version?
No, when I saw this version, when I was a teenager, that was it for me. that was all Tom, like, the Talented Mr. Ripley consisted of. It didn't even occur to me to read the book until maybe about like 3 years ago. I was like, oh, I like this film so much. I probably, like, literally, when I tell you, like, the image of Jude Law's naked bottom coming out of a bath just fully stunted my brain for a while, where I, like, 3 years ago, I was like, oh, I should read the book.
You really wanted the Dickie Greenleaf prequel, didn't you? You're just like,
Yeah,
you know
I was
what,
like,
Tom
let me-
Ripley, don't really care much about him, but that Dickie, though.
Let me find out about this Dickie person. But like, yeah, when I literally was like, other films, and I was like looking up, and I was like, oh yeah, there's quite a few. My goodness.
Wow.
No, I'm going to watch them, but I had zero sense of them. I do find it interesting how different the actors who have played him are.
Yes.
It's so fascinating how open to interpretation this character is, because all of the actors I play, I feel like a very different castings.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love them. Can I give you a brief primer on the other Tom Ripleys? Mainly because I need. I think I've exhausted. I'm gonna take advantage of our friendship here and be like, I need to continue talking about Tom Ripley. Like, I've written about it. I've written about the other films. I've watched all the things. I've read the books, and nobody will listen to me talk about Tom Ripley. So now, unfortunately, you're gonna have to.
Perfect.
But
I love this hostage situation. Yeah.
I do want to sell you on the other films because they're so different. And watching them close together is just this. I cannot understand how badly or how differently the same character has been interpreted, because the first one was The Purple Noon, same story, right? It's a 1960 French film. Alain Delon plays Tom Ripley, and you're like, okay, well, there's your first mistake. Who the fuck would want to be anyone other than Alain Delon in 1960? Right. Like, what are you talking about? Like, he is the hottest person in the movie, and he's the hottest person in like any room or any country that he's in. So you're like, why would this Tom want anything? And he's very cruel, he's very mean to everyone because no one is as hot as he is. And then he's Dennis Hopper in The American Friend, which adapts the third book and a little bit of the second, which really pissed off Patricia Highsmith, which I found really funny. She's like, Wim Wenders only paid for one book. He didn't, and then he adapted two. Which is Dennis Hopper. And Dennis Hopper is a weirdo. And Tom Ripley is not a weirdo. He's kind of a sort of a sociopath. So it's a very strange performance where you're like, oh, I'm watching Dennis Hopper be weird, but I'm not really watching Tom Ripley. And it's a great movie, but it doesn't really feel like a Ripley movie. It's very, like, it's like a criminal movie. There's like a forgery thing going on and like contract killings and stuff. And it just feels completely different. Then there's A Talented Mr. Ripley. Iconic. Never been better. Ripley's Game, which is John Malkovich as Tom Ripley. And it's the same storyline as The American Friend. It's adapted from the same book, Ripley's Game, which is the third one in the Ripley ad. I fucking love John Malkovich. And I love John Malkovich as Tom Ripley because, and again, this is me projecting onto him. I'm sure he's a lovely person. He seems like a sociopath to me. He constantly plays kind of sociopathic characters. He's so good at them, but he plays sociopaths who fuck all the time.
Yes.
And he's so kind of, it's not explicitly said because he's married in the film as Ripley is in the subsequent books after the first one, but he plays him in such a bisexual way. Well, like in one scene, he's got this big mansion with his French wife who's like very hot and a harpsichordist, which is a thing apparently that hot people can do.
Right.
And he's like in these satin sheets at night with a little lamp sewing his satin pajamas because there's a rip or something. And then his hot harpsichordist wife comes in and and they start going at it. I'm like, this is the most bisexual thing I've ever seen. There's no bisexual lighting, none of that like purple, blue, pink stuff. It's more like, oh, you can do both. Your Ripley can do both. You can be like sitting in satin pajamas sewing, and then immediately after a hot woman comes in, you're like full on her, fingering her. Like, yes, John Malkovich, you can do this. And then he just murders people and cracks jokes after it immediately. He's full blown sociopathic killer in this. And he like set the whole premise of that film and the book, I think, is the cruelest Ripley has ever been, is that he sets up a young picture framer that lives in his French village. It's like a neighbor of his. He sets him up to be used as a contract killer. And this picture framer has leukemia. So he's like chronically ill. And he sets him up to like become a murderer and be involved in this like gangster in business because the picture framer is a bit cunty to Tom Ripley at a party. And he's like, well, I didn't like that, so I'm now gonna lure you into
have to do literally the answer to every question. He's like, what should I do about this? I don't know. Something to do with murder, I suppose.
Yes.
I also love all the jobs here, like harpsichordist, picture framer.
I know.
It's like, okay.
Just like these people exist. And then in the final movie that was very hard to find, I don't think it's on any streaming service, and it's Ripley Underground, which is the adaptation of the second book in the Ripley. It's 2005, and it's Barry Pepper playing Tom Ripley. Barry Pepper, best known as the sniper from Saving Private Ryan, which Matt Damon was also in, it is the most bizarre fucking film. It is extremely 2005 in the sense that everyone is wearing like low-rise pants. Everyone's sort of fucking each other. Tom Ripley's like this effortlessly charming, but not really charming because of the script. We're just told that he's charming because all the women are just throwing themselves at him. Claire Forlani is in it. Ian Hart is in it, and Alan Cumming is in it, playing an art gallery dude. It is not good, but it is hilariously of its time. In just if someone can watch it because they're a Ripley completist, I recommend it, mainly because it is such a bizarre. Every single choice is completely bizarre, down to the casting of Barry Pepper as Ripley. Because I'm like, he is very good looking, but what?
Yeah, and I think that's a misconception with when it's cast as someone who's good, like really obviously good looking, in a way that's like, oh, there's a very attractive man. It's like, well, then he'd have access to places without very much trouble.
Yes.
It wouldn't be very hard. He wouldn't need to be as smart as he is if he just had that, because that is a pass. He's like, if he was a good looking, like mobile, like white man, like he's gonna be fine. It's like he's not like repulsive, but he's meant to be more average. In my head, he's way more average.
Yes, I agree.
That's fascinating. That is fascinating. Because and that also is interesting because obviously Malkovich is in the new series Ripley, so that's a nice little okay. That's cute. It's very cute.
Yes.
It is a weird role to cast. I can imagine it is a really weird role to play. And I think it's a weird film to adapt because once something's seen as the like epitome of it, as far as like the films is concerned, we have like The Talented Mr. Ripley, which is kind of seen as the Ripley film, right?
Absolutely.
And it's very hard to, you can't really the source material is so good and so specific, it's hard to deviate too much. Like, yes, you can throw in a Meredith here and there, but like, it's hard when if it's too different, it just kind of loses what it is. And even though we're from Ripley's point of view in the books, like obviously all the time, he's a weird character. He's hard to pin down. He talks about himself in the third person so much.
Yes,
he's not entirely sure who Tom Ripley is, so it's hard to play that. And I guess that makes it hard to cast as well, but that's really interesting.
So there's this line in the book in The Talented Mr. Ripley, which I find really haunting and really revealing of Ripley as a character. And I think this film isn't as interested in that in the way that the series is. And the line is, "This was the real annihilation of his past and of himself, Tom Ripley, who was made up of that past and his rebirth as a completely new person." And it's this thing of him shedding the identity of Tom Ripley and being uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
And I think this film takes that and makes it into a very human, very sympathetic story. You know, he's like, the identity that he's uncomfortable with because of the environment that he exists in is that of a gay man. So he's deeply closeted and kind of not able to find someone until Peter Smith Kingsley that allows him to be comfortable with himself and just to exist as Tom Ripley, and that being good enough for the world. But in the book, it's a lot colder of like, there is nothing of Tom Ripley. And but there is Dickie, no matter how unlikable or kind of pathetic he is as this wannabe painter that's just a rich boy, he is someone, and Tom feels like he's no one. So he keeps trying to like become, he's more comfortable faking being Dickie Greenleaf than he is being Tom Ripley.
Yeah, and I think you said it earlier that he feels like he's a better Dickie than Dickie ever was.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, if I'd been born with this name and this money and this opportunity, I'd be doing it much better than you. And that's what he and then he does. He's like, in the book, he's like, oh, I can do it better than him. And there's a bit where he has to be Tom again after the Freddie murder. And he literally is like finding it hard to find Tom's voice.
Totally.
And he's finding it hard. He's uncomfortable putting the character of Tom back on. Like, he doesn't know what Tom's face does anymore. He doesn't remember and it's just literally like, he was so comfortable. So yeah, you're right. In the film, the sad thing that happens is that he has to be Dickie again. When he was just about learning how to enjoy being Tom, he has to be Dickie again. And in the book, he never wants to be Tom again.
Yes.
He's perfectly happy being Dickie. If he could have lived the rest of his life in like Italy being Dickie and like with his things, going to art galleries and never really even talking to anyone too much, he would have been very happy. I mean, probably not for long. The nature of his character suggests that something would have happened to make him get bored or want to move on or want to do something else. But like, yeah, it's telling that they changed that about. It's like the sad thing for him is being Dickie again, whereas in the book it's very much being Tom again. It's a sad thing for him.
And before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to say about Tom Ripley or the talented Mr. Ripley?
I do think it's just, you're right, it is just a really well paced and thought out film. Like the opening credits kind of show Ripley in like these like shards of like picture before we're fully on the screen, and how we end with the mirror, I guess, from the wardrobe moving on this boat, so we're seeing kind of Ripley and then we're not and then we are, and it is just like, I do kind of like how straight to the point it is, or like how subtext is barely subtext. Like there's a point where he's looking for Dickie when he first gets to Montebello, and he sees Dickie out on the beach, and he's looking through binoculars and he's learning Italian from a tape, and there's a line that says, "This is my face," which probably isn't an Italian sentence that you'd ever use or would ever be on a language tape, but it's on this tape, and he's looking at Dickie and he says, "This is my face," and it's just like this huge, like, he's gonna steal his identity, guys. Like, and I love that it's not that subtle in those things. I love that a lot of the stuff is just said, like we said in the boat when Tom's yelling at him about all this, about the chess playing and leading him on and all this stuff, and the Marge and all this stuff, and then Dickie does the same thing where it's like, "You're boring, you're following me around." I love that a lot of it is just right on there. All the ways that Freddie calls Tom out, like the film itself, is just like full color, full detail, just really like, yeah, I think it's a brilliant film. The fact that both of us have watched it a lot recently, and that I had no issue watching it. Like, I watched it yesterday and then started watching it again today. Like, no problem with it. Like, it doesn't really ever get boring. Because there's always like little things to notice, even though it's not incredibly subtle. Like, I find that, like, there's always like nice little moments that you're like, ooh. But yeah, I do love it. The only thing I would add, if I had to add anything to that film, is, as I always say with any film where someone's murdering multiple people, is I want more turmoil when it comes to disposing of the body, because that's hard work and I don't want it to look too easy. I'm always a bit like,
You don't want it to give the wrong impression.
I don't want the wrong impression given. It's hard lifting a body. The way he lifts Freddie Miles into his car, like, you would be dying lifting Freddie Miles like that. You'd be like, your knees would be buckling. Absolutely not. I want it to look harder than that. And the very last thing I will say is I do love in this adaptation that he spends so long with Dickie's body, which obviously he doesn't in the book. That he spends, we don't know for how long, but we
love
assume
that shot.
A fair amount of time has passed, that he wraps himself in Dickie's arms and just lays there with his body, which also I think plays a massive part to how sympathetic we feel about him. But yeah.
I think, yes, that's such a beautiful shot. It's like an overhead shot of him being wrapped up in dead Dickie's arms. The last thing I will say about this is that I think that we as a culture do not appreciate Anthony Minghella enough, because that man, my God, made just banger after banger. If this is not horror at all, but like it consistently would make people look their hottest that they've ever looked in their entire lives in his films. Just think of The English Patient.
Yes.
It's just stunning work.
Yeah, oh my God, I'm just looking at his films right now. Yeah, you're right. He's just like, look at these really beautiful people. Like, even Cold Mountain, which I don't think is a particularly good film, but like, Kate, what's her fucking name? What's her name?
Renee Zellweger?
No.
Nicole Kidman?
Nicole Kidman. Oh my God, I fully was like, I have no idea what that woman's name is. I say one of the Kates? Is she one of the Kates? I was like, oh wow, I'm so sorry, Nicole. But she looks amazing in it. Like, she's just in those big dresses. She's really wearing the hell out of those big dresses. Even when she's playing like rustic, when like the war's happening and she has to like wear man clothes, and like she looks glorious. And the love scene in Cold Mountain, my God, my goodness, my giddy God. But yeah, I think he does make everyone look very, and I think, you know, it's a real talent to make a film about someone who essentially just murders a lot of people and is willing to murder more people. Feel sympathetic, where you do feel sorry for him and you are a little bit on his side. You're like, I guess he had to do that. Like, I think takes real talent to do. I don't think that would be an easy thing to do. Totally.
And I think we should talk about Ripley, the series, separately.
We have to at some point.
We have
because... Listen, yeah, we have to. I have so many feelings.
Very obsessed with that show.
So many feelings.
Very much. But in the meantime, Isaura, thank you so much. I knew this was going to be super fun, and it did not disappoint.
This is an absolute joy. Anytime I get to talk about Talented Mr. Ripley is great.
Also, just Jude Law. Jude Law, 1999.
Jude Law. My God. Good golly, man. Good golly. Oof.